the line between faith and false hope. Several times a week now, thousands of believers from around the country flock to a revival in Mobile, Alabama, in search of healing, and not only spiritual. Encouraged by videos that have spread on the internet, many earnestly hope for a divine cure to physical conditions as serious as paralysis or blindness. But who presides over this flock? My co-anchor Bill Weir reports for our series, Faith Matters.
It is 2 hours till revival time at the Mobile Convention Center, and a small crowd is already waiting for the doors to open. Some have traveled through the night, drawn by the wonders they've seen on the internet.
Come on, give Jesus some praise!
Heal me.
Evangelist Nathan was praying for a man, and I didn't see Nathan. I saw Jesus.
We're hoping, number one, for a miracle for my wife. You know, she is blind and almost totally deaf.
Lee and Janet Frost join the rush into the convention hall.
Jesus!
Convinced that God has descended on coastal Alabama to mend bodies and save souls. Their anticipation builds as the 1,000-plus crowd is led into song. As tears roll, many pray in tongues, that spontaneous language of the Holy Spirit. 1 hour of worship rolls into 2. They move from exuberance into a trance and back again, until visiting evangelist Nathan Morris announces the healings have begun.
I see a young boy being healed of brittle bone disease right now. A growth on the left side is being healed right now.
He calls for testimonials.
I want to hear what God's doing.
And many describe how God cured them right here, just nights before.
The miracle is that the lungs opened.
I came in limping last night and I left walking without a limp.
Jesus! Come on!
Their stories fill Lee and Janet with even more faith and hope, but they will have to wait to be touched.
I need to take an offering tonight.
A second healing session will come after the sermon and the offering.
If you say as a people, we want this revival to continue, then I'm going to ask from the bottom of my heart that you would give tonight.
Though he is conspicuously absent from the pulpit on this night, Pastor John Kilpatrick presides over this revival, a position he knows quite well.
It was the most wonderful feeling that I've ever felt in my whole life.
In the mid-90s, he went from an obscure Brownsville, Florida preacher to a Pentecostal sensation when he claimed to be knocked to the stage by the Holy Spirit and paralyzed for hours by the power of God. Just like that, the Brownsville revival began without plan or warning, he says, and the miracles lasted for 5 years as his congregation nearly tripled in size.
It's almost like gas collecting in a room, and then someone lights a spark or lights a match and the room just explodes into the presence of God and the power of God.
But an award-winning investigation by a Pensacola newspaper raised questions about the revival's finances. Kilpatrick's ministry denied any wrongdoing.
For the press that came after me at Brownsville was a vendetta, and it was over a certain thing that I'm not going to get into, but it was a vendetta, and it was picked up by newspapers around the world.
While history seems to be repeating 15 years and 60 miles from Brownsville, Kilpatrick insists this time there is no reason for controversy.
What does a typical tithes and offerings for a revival night like this bring in?
I'll tell you what a typical night is. Expenses is $16,400.
God bless you as you give.
And most nights we have in the neighborhood of 7,000, 8,000 come in.
The size of this revival depends largely on word of mouth and YouTube spectacle.
I'm feeling your hands on my legs.
Attendance jumped after this video went viral. It shows Kilpatrick and Morris helping a paraplegic local pastor named Delia Knox out of her wheelchair. Her struggle is obvious, but for believers, this is proof of God's power in Mobile.
A lot of you are holding her, and this is a woman with atrophied muscles forcing her way along. Why didn't God heal her entirely? Why wasn't she able to get up and run around the room if that in fact was a miracle?
What I want to ask you is, why does she have to?
It would be a lot more convincing.
Who do we need to convince? I think as far as she's concerned, she was in a wheelchair for 23 years and now she's walking.
We wondered if she'd ever tried this with physical therapists and how she's doing now, so we reached out to Delia Knox twice, but she did not respond. But Debbie Casebolt, she was eager to share how complications from a decade of deliberately untreated breast cancer filled her lungs with a gelatinous fluid. She says doctors tried to drain and open them, but nothing happened until her husband brought her here.
And now they're clear.
Yes.
What about the cancer?
The cancer's still there as far as I know. And so I'm just believing God to finish the work.
You think by taking medicine or chemotherapy it might show a lesser faith?
No. I was perfectly prepared to walk the way the doctors have said, but God spoke to our hearts and said, don't do it that way. You follow me. And so I said, okay. I know when God speaks to me.
Hank Hanegraaff is convinced they have been dangerously misled.
When you start to deny your symptoms because you are told that you've been healed of whatever malady that you have, you are now putting yourself at risk.
As president of the Christian Research Institute and author of Counterfeit Revival, Hanegraaff has been a critic of John Kilpatrick since the days of Brownsville. He believes that God can heal, but says these services are just a form of group hypnosis on desperate and vulnerable people.
This is something that you can find in Vegas in a good magician's act. This is just plain old socio-psychological manipulation.
Fire!
It's fast food Christianity on steroids.
Why do you need to touch them on the forehead if the room is so full of the Spirit?
I have to say, when you lay hands on people, there's times that you feel something go into them. It feels like warmth. It feels like a wind. Sometimes it feels like heat.
I think the Apostle John said, test the Spirit, beware of false prophets.
Sure.
How do we know you guys aren't false prophets?
I believe that what the Lord is doing in the revival is a sign of that He's involved in, and He is blessing it.
Until the day I die, I want to fight to keep my belief in God and to believe that God can do anything. I want to be one of the ones that says with a childlike faith, I do believe.
That childlike faith positively glows on the faces of Lee and Janet as the grand finale of this revival night builds. Morris, Kilpatrick, and their team of prayer warriors wade through the crowd, slaying believers in the Spirit. Janet seems impervious to the stimulus around her until she is eventually touched and goes down with a peaceful smile. After the service, she is still without hearing or sight, but their faith remains.
If he'd had time to pray for my wife, it would have been awesome. But we'll be back, and we'll have that opportunity again. So.
You will come back?
Oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir. We'll come back again. Yeah, definitely.
And they'll have plenty of opportunity. The Bay of the Holy Spirit revival has been extended indefinitely. I'm Bill Weir for Nightline in Mobile, Alabama.